What the heck is going on with Zion Williamson? Changing agents, missing injury timelines, viral videos? Is it just time to move on? Can the Pelicans even do that? It's the Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Monday, and we got a fully Zion-centric episode because, was a lot going on over the weekend. We'll try and make sense of what's going on with the agents, the missing injury timelines, the viral video, all of that. We're going to explain it in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast for a reason, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Let me know what you want the team to do with Zion Williamson in the comments down below. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. And go check out LockedOnDaily.com to subscribe to the daily, 5-day a week at least, Locked On Pelicans, completely free Pelicans newsletter. More on Zion in that one here. So let's start with this. This is exhausting. If you're a Pelicans fan, all the news and things coming out over the past couple of days, really just on Friday, is absolutely exhausting. Zion talking to the media kind of with some non-answers. That tattoo video and what Zion looks like. A Shams Charania report about him already missing his timeline. News coming out in the middle of a game that he is splitting up with his agency. What the heck is going on here? Because this seems like a lot all at once. And it's exhausting because it also overshadows the actual NBA game that happened on Friday, where the Pelicans were really competitive with the Golden State Warriors. And it would be really interesting to analyze those final couple possessions. Should Brandon Ingram have taken that final shot? Should it have gone to Trey Murphy? What about the free throw issues there? Was there anything they could do to win the game? And it's completely overshadowed by this other stuff. So all of it, right, is just exhausting. And if you're a Pelicans fan, you're probably exhausted, and I get it. So let's kind of go through some of these things, and the show will be a little bit more fluid. We'll get into then kind of, could you trade Zion, the best case scenario for the season? But this opening part where we kind of break all this down is going to take a little bit of a while here. So the tattoo video, the answers to the media about his injury, the Shams report, and then the CAA, his agency news. So look, honestly, for all of these things, there are explanations that aren't necessarily bad. So what people maybe want to come in and be like, I hate Zion, get rid of him, all that. There's actually like very reasonable explanations for everything, right? We don't know if he fired his agency or they dropped him. And what I've kind of been told is he just wanted to make a move. The tattoo video is old, not recent, and likely came after he was injured a while back. So it kind of explains why his body looks like what it does, especially because everyone says he came into the season in good shape. When he answered kind of the media saying, like, yeah, I feel like I can do more and I'm on the timeline. What did you expect him to say from that? That's, of course, what he's going to say when it comes to that. And then in terms of the agency stuff, players change representation. I don't want to say necessarily often, but it happens and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. So we can rationalize it. We can explain it. We can defend what's going on. I just kind of did. But honestly, I don't really care to. This is exhausting and not a way that a franchise can operate and build a sustainable winner. And even if it can all be defended, should it be? Yes, injuries might mean he can do some of his offseason prep work, and maybe that's why, or he can't do some of the offseason stuff, so maybe that's why his body doesn't look like a professional athlete in that photo, in that video, the tattoo thing. But the answer is, while that's explainable, there's probably more he could be doing and he wasn't doing. And should you ever look that out of shape? Yes, no, maybe. It doesn't matter, right? Should that video have even come out? A tattoo artist like that is usually going to sign a contract with an athlete, a celebrity, to eventually showcase their work. It's on a very big stage there, right? Especially a big piece like that for Zion. But do something to not let that come out. Splitting with CAA, his agency, whatever, right? We'll see what it looks like when he lists his new representation. You can't do that for 15 days per the Players Association rules. But here's the thing with him leaving CAA. Again, in a vacuum, it doesn't mean anything, right? Like, I don't think that this means he's looking to try and force a trade or whatever with it. And I've seen some of the reporting of like why he was firing his agency or whatever, that he didn't realize what was in his contract and all of that, or he wants to go to New York. I don't think any of that's actually it, to be perfectly honest with y'all. His contract for the most part is fully guaranteed. It only matters if they completely cut him. It's not like if he's injured, he gets paid 20% less. As long as he's on the team, he's getting paid every penny of that contract. I've been saying that since the provisions and all of that have been announced, that a lot has been made over, it's not guaranteed or whatever. That don't matter. They're not going to waive him. It's really that simple. So it hasn't ever been a thing that I'm really concerned about with it. In terms of the stuff of him wanting to go to New York and CAA didn't do that. Y'all, CAA is like in bed with the Knicks. They may as well be married. They're all Knicks people. Look, Karl Anthony Towns, who didn't want to get really traded from the Minnesota Timberwolves, was traded to the Knicks. He's repped by CAA. I don't think it's anything bigger than Zion just wants to do a change for whatever reason. Now, you can say, and this is one of the criticisms of it, should you? CAA is usually considered one of the top agencies. You sign with them, you are in very good hands. If he actively wants to leave CAA, what does that say? Is he going to another agency that will take better care of him? Probably not. They'll probably take the same care and have the same options for him. He's Zion Williamson, right? It's not like CAA was holding things back from him or anything like that, or someone can do things better than them. They all may as well kind of be the same thing. So it's not going to be better. It might be the same, but it's not going to be better. Maybe it's just a change, right? So all of this is to say, like, all this kind of makes some sense. With the team losing and due to other injuries too, but also because Zion not being healthy, this creates a heightened sense of it just feels like they need to flush things and start fresh. Now, they might not actually be able to do that, but it at least kind of has that feeling, and I get it. I'm even feeling it right now. So again, while all of this might be nothing, and look, it's only been 2 weeks since his hamstring injury, 2.5 weeks since he suffered that hamstring imaging, right? Nothing is actually off schedule yet. And this is an important distinction with that, I think. I don't think there's been a setback or that he's not on any sort of correct timeline, because there were no timelines set by the team. And I think that's an important thing. Let's look at that. It's a good way to kind of segue to the next segment too. Let's look at the injury timeline stuff, because of things that matter to the team today, the agent stuff doesn't. The video doesn't, because it's old, so who cares at this point in time? Yeah, take better care of yourself. We all know that. But it doesn't matter to the team going forward. Missing injury timelines might, but here's the thing. There was no timeline. I'll explain what I mean by that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Skims. Look, we all wear underwear every day, but have you switched up the type of underwear that you wear since, I don't know, maybe college? For those who haven't heard, Skims now offers men's underwear, and I'm here to tell you it is absolutely worth the hype. I bought a whole bunch of this stuff because, frankly, it feels amazing. I fly a lot for the full-time job and other things. I was just on a road trip from Los Angeles to New Orleans. You got to be comfortable when you're traveling like that. Skims, honestly, it felt incredible. I've tried other different brands, but nothing fits quite right. Skims really does. And I really like the stretch boxer brief that they have. I like that kind of jersey material, the slicker material like that is on you and keeping everything in place, but not too loose. It's still breathable. You're not sweating in that. I can wear these either in a long car ride, go to the gym, whatever it might be. The Skims 5-inch stretch boxer brief is the one that I really like. You have all of that movement, but it doesn't feel like you're necessarily in gym clothes all day. So they never lose their shape. They're not riding up, which is also really important. If it can handle a 4 or 5 hour plane flight, 4 days in a car, look, It's about as good as it's going to get. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey. Select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever. Also available at skims.com/LockedOnNBA. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast. Not trying to sensationalize everything, just kind of tell you what you need to know and make sense of all of the stuff out there. And truthfully, I don't think a lot of this honestly matters, but it's not a good look and it is exhausting. And sometimes it's like you just can't keep living this way, right? By the way, your favorite podcast, Locked On Pelicans, has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. So let's continue to talk about Zion Williamson. Again, I don't think there is anything to him wanting to force a trade or anything like that. I don't think that has anything to do with the new representation. I think he just wants a change for whatever reason. And maybe that's misguided. I think that's fair to say. CAA would give you any resource you want to kind of make the most of your career, and maybe Zion wasn't doing that. And no, frankly, that's not a good thing, to not take advantage of the resources that you have available to you, especially when they're easy, they're free, they're not going to cost you anything like that. Just like why you should take advantage of the free daily Locked On Pelicans newsletter. It's a mistake not to. All right, anyway, you get what I'm saying though. Like, yeah, it might not mean anything in terms of wanting to trade or whatever, but it says something about his mentality, his thought process, and how he's approaching his career. You know, that viral video, it's old. It's not actually recent. It's old. It is what it is, right? He wasn't like that coming into the season. That's good. You can argue that maybe he should never be that out of shape, and you'd probably be correct, but we know he needs to do more, and he needs to do more. It's as simple as that. If he doesn't, then it's going to continue to impact him in a negative way like it is now, and that'll get into the can you trade him stuff that we're about to talk about here. But let's look at the injury timeline, because that also came out from Shams Charania on Friday after Zion had talked to the media saying, I'm on track. And then Shams comes out and goes, they're bracing for him to be out way longer than the 4 to 6 week timeline that was put out there. But here's the thing. The Pelicans did not put out a 4 to 6 week timeline. When they announced the press release after the imaging, they said indefinitely. So Shams Charania somewhere came up with a 4 to 6 week timeline. They didn't tell him that. I can tell you the team didn't tell him that. He wherever he got that, he got it, but it wasn't what the team was putting out there. Now, maybe it's just 4 to 6 weeks is the usual thing for these hamstring injuries. That's what Jose's is. It's a similar injury. But Zion probably isn't on a 4 to 6 week timeline. That timeline is somewhat artificially created and not necessarily accurate. So the team wasn't really bracing for anything for him to be out longer than 4 to 6 weeks or whatever, because that's what their expectation was when it comes to all of this, right? So it's been 2.5 weeks. It hasn't been 4. It hasn't been 6. Nothing is technically like off schedule yet. One, because there was no schedule in the first place, but even if it's 4 to 6 weeks, it wasn't. We knew it was always going to be the 6 week timeline. I just went and filmed over at Fox 8 for their Fox 8 overtime. That's on Sunday night, 10:30, I think, if you're listening to this before that. You know, I was asked the question by Madeline Adams, and she goes, you know, do you expect it to be longer? And it was like, yeah, based on the history, like, of course it's going to be longer. That just is what it is. Again, you can look at that and go, like, there's no way you can keep building around this guy. It's time to just move on, because this isn't how a team can really just build something for the future. And you'd be correct in saying all of that. He needs to do more. And if he's not going to do more, and going to a different agency isn't necessarily going to change anything, well, then it probably is time to move on here. But, you know, you look at kind of the injury timeline there, it's exhausting, right? We don't know when he might return because of all of that. And so I think that's an important distinction to make. He's not behind. He's not off schedule. The team's not bracing for anything right now because they weren't expecting him back in 4 to 6 weeks. They never thought that that was necessarily going to be realistic. Now, he might. And then what's also exhausting about this is when he speaks to the media the other day, and one of his comments was really important to kind of look at. And this also is going to lead into the should they trade him kind of thing. You know, he said, when asked, like, what can you do? And he was like, well, if you ask me, I can do a lot. Kind of basically saying, like, I can do more than the team is letting me do. It seems like we're gearing up for another Zion versus the medical staff battle. This is round 4, 5, 6, something like that when it comes to it. This is going to be the theme of the show. That's exhausting. They revamped it to kind of appease him, appease Brandon Ingram a year ago, all of that. And it worked for the most part. And now it seems like they're kind of butting heads again. Now that's one little phrase, one little line, one little word, and maybe that's not the we don't want to read too much into that, but it's exhausting. There's a moment where your life's not going the way you want it to do. Look, I can speak from this personally. I've been in positions before where you kind of like wake up one day and you're like, I can't keep doing this anymore. Right? I can tell you there was a point a couple of years ago, it was during the Suns playoff series. I was being really unhealthy. I was up late doing bonus shows, things like that, covering that playoff series for y'all, like eating unhealthy, not getting enough sleep, like not working out at all. I just was tired all the time. And one day I was like, I can't keep living like this. I started making changes, serious changes to my diet, working out, all of that. And I feel a million times better. But sometimes there's other things in your life where you wake up and you're like, I can't do this anymore. The team feels like they're kind of at that point of, can you keep doing this? Right? Even if Zion did all of the right things this offseason, and look, by all accounts he did, this injury still happened. So there's more you've got to do. But if Zion's not going to do that, you're going to run into the same situation again. And you just can't keep living this way, right? And you look at all of these things, again, all of it might be nothing. It's been 2 weeks, right? Nothing's necessarily off schedule despite the Shams report. But the bad management, he has enough money to get a fixer to make that video not appear, right? Even if there was something contractual with the artist. He could absolutely be doing more to take care of his body, even if he did a good job this offseason. It's the weeks it took him to talk to the media, 2.5 weeks. He chose not to. That's not great. Control the narrative rather than letting it run amok, but that's something that he's done his whole career. These might be minor, but they show bad choices, bad process. And that adds up. And it feels like it's a big, big load to bear right now. So could they actually move on from Zion Williamson? Can you flush it this season and do all of that? I'm here to tell you the bad news is the answer is no. I don't think he has any trade value around the league right now because he doesn't play. And for all of the reasons, if you're someone who wants to trade Zion Williamson, for all the reasons that you want to trade him, is all the reasons why another team's going to be like, absolutely not. The opportunity to do that was probably this offseason or the offseason before that when they've kicked the tires on all of that. But look, they probably looked at Zion. They had people around him all summer. He was doing all of the right things, and it felt like this would be okay. And it turns out still no. So even when you're doing the right things and it's leading to all this, that's not great, right? And then you look at his contract, and again, I'm not reading too much into the non-guarantee and all of that stuff. He's making $36.7 million this year. He's missed 11 games. Who's going to pay that? Next year, he's going to make 40. The year after that is $42 million. And then the year after that is 44.8. Is anyone going to really take that on if Zion's not going to be playing or going to be dealing with these injuries? Now, the one good thing about those unguaranteed clauses in his contract, which based off weight and other check-ins and other things like that, and again, it doesn't really matter, is that maybe means the contract's more tradable, that a team could give up relatively little for Zion and go, okay, well, if it doesn't work out, we just cut him because we won't owe him the money because the rest of the contract's not guaranteed. You can trade it and it gives a team trading for him some protection, but they're still not going to give up a lot and be like, yeah, we'll trade a bunch of assets and then worst case is we just waive him. No one's going to do that. So that presents part of the problem with it, right? He's kind of at his lowest point. Same thing with Brandon Ingram this past offseason. That was one of the things that kind of came about from all those conversations of trading him and what have you. Of no team wanted to do that because wanted him after a bad playoff series. So you'd be trading him for pennies on the dollar in a sense here. And maybe you just need to do that to move on from Zion. But that's going to put you even in a worse spot if you're not getting things in return from him or if you were to just waive him outright. So that doesn't put them in a good position either. So it just basically means they hope he comes back. They hope that they can look good and that this isn't a fully lost season for the New Orleans Pelicans. So they are still in position where things could make this year worthwhile, I think. And we'll look at the best case scenario for New Orleans coming up in the next segment here. And that's Zion Williamson and New Orleans. But I don't think it's very realistic for them to trade him right now. This offseason, yeah, but then you want him coming back and playing well to kind of build up some of that trade value again. Leading the Pelicans to a play-in tournament spot, something like that. That would go a long way towards all of that. It sounds like he could be playing by January. Late December, early January could be a realistic thing. The season might be lost at that point in time in terms of making the playoffs, but all this other stuff, it's tiring, even if it means nothing. And I don't think him changing agencies from the people I've talked to with this, that it matters at all. Truthfully, right? At least not for this season or anything like that. To me, it's immaterial when it comes to his contract and things like that. It just shows, man, you had one of the best agencies in the world. And from where it sounds like he's going to go, it's a good agency too. And it's not like they're going to take bad care of him, right? But it's you're not going to get other resources that you didn't have available before necessarily. So if you didn't take advantage of them then, and now you're screw those guys, I'm leaving. And that's what it was. It wasn't CAA dropping him. It says something, right? It says something, and it doesn't say something good. And I think that's the overall concern with this. So it's not so much that he's doing this. It's just, well, then what does that say about his process, his preparation, his mentality of who he listens to and all of those things? And I think that's what's so concerning about that. The missing the timeline and stuff, there was no timeline set. We shouldn't go off of Shams Charania just kind of bringing one up, and you could say, well, 4 to 6 weeks is the usual timeline. Yeah, but that's an average timeline. There's people above that and there's people below that, and Zion, given the injury history, is always likely going to be above that. There's a reason the Pelicans didn't put 4 to 6 weeks on there, because they weren't necessarily expecting 4 to 6 weeks, right? So I think they kind of saw that report from Shams and was like, what the heck? And we're not happy about that, because that was not something that they really communicated to him when it comes to all of it, right? Even that video, the tattoo, that shouldn't be a big deal, but in the grand scheme of everything else, it's just another little thing that adds up, and that is exhausting, and that is tiring, and people just don't want to do it anymore. And that's kind of where we stand with it all right now. And that's why people want to trade Zion Williamson. That's why I'm frustrated, you're frustrated, other people are frustrated too. Might not matter, but it just always feels like it's something. And it's can we just watch basketball? Even if you're not necessarily winning, can we just watch basketball? Go out and play, but lose, that'd be a different story. But can we just watch basketball? And we're just not. And that is tiring. So this stuff has to change. It has to change. Zion needs to make the changes now. Or the team does need to move on, because you can't. It goes back to what I said at the beginning of this part, right? You just can't. I can't keep living this way is kind of what they're saying, what you're saying. Can't keep doing this anymore. It's what it feels like. So coming up next, let's be positive. We'll end the show on a positive note here. What's the best case scenario? And there's more than one that you might think. And there is a very good best case scenario that does not involve the Pelicans making the playoffs. That might sound weird, but hear me out on that. Coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all the NFL and NBA action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. We got Thanksgiving and a ton of games coming up. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, secretly good night for the Pelicans. They actually might be favored against the Toronto Raptors in that game too. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is my go-to ticketing app because I love all of the features that they have. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. And Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't need to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And Game Time isn't just for live sporting events. It's comedy, theater, concerts, and more. And with Game Time Picks, you get that curation, making it even easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. They have all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And you also get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So if you're going someplace new, you're going to know exactly what to expect. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, coming to you and covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Not like sensationalizing it, not just being like, Zion sucks, trade it. There's stuff you need to know, and the context around all of that I think is really important. And even in a really difficult season for New Orleans, there's interesting things to watch at in these games, and I love talking about those and sharing those with you. So if you're a new listener and you're just trying to tune in to kind of know more about the Zion situation here, I appreciate you listening today. We got a ton more coverage for you on everything going on around this team. And in the context, I do think is really important. But it does feel like something's got to change soon. Or at least there needs to be kind of like a commitment to change, whether it's the Pelicans kind of like internally, and you won't get that publicly being like, yeah, we're going to move on. We can't do this anymore. Or Zion being like, I can't do this anymore. Let me show you how committed I am. And it's going to be show it, right? Not hide from the media like he has before. Openly talk about where he's failed and what he's doing to change it, and then back those words up with actions. That's a really important thing here. So we just went over, you can't move on from Zion in the middle of the season. You're just not going to be able to do it. The offseason, different story, but even then, I still think it's going to be kind of difficult for them to do it. So what is the best case scenario for New Orleans? You know, we'll talk later this week about kind of the pace the Pelicans need to play at to make the postseason. The best case scenario is you get the 6th seed. You go on an incredible run once everybody's healthy, and then you get the 6th seed, and cool, we're in the postseason, not going through the play-in tournament. I don't think that's realistic at this point. You're 9 games under 500. You are actually with the worst record in the Western Conference right now. And Zion, is maybe going to be back at the beginning of January. And in his media availability said, he's like, we'll be all whole in January. So he kind of sees that maybe as his time when he's going to return to the court. Okay, that's fair. And that kind of gives us a better timeline expectation than what Shams Charania has said here, which is just kind of basing that off of what a hamstring usually is. But that's not the case for Zion. He shouldn't be kind of lumped in with like everybody else, for worse when it comes to that. Not for better or worse, but just for worse when it comes to it. So, if you can go on a run, that would be great. If you can go on a run just to get into the play-in tournament, I think that would also be considered a real big win. If you got to the 10th seed and look, you're 15th now, so you need to jump Utah, Portland, Sacramento, San Antonio, and Minnesota in the moment here. That's 5 teams to jump. When you're this far back, that's rough, right? Minnesota's in the 10th spot at 8-7. San Antonio is a game above 500 at 9-8. They're 9 games under 500. So even if they went on a 9-game winning streak right now, they likely aren't even getting past San Antonio or Minnesota when it comes to it, right? That's kind of how far down this team needs to get. And that's from the play-in spot, let alone from the 6th seed, which is 10-7 right now. So you look at this and it just makes you feel like that is out of reach. So they should tank, right? There's another best case scenario that doesn't involve making the playoffs. And that is actually going on a run and getting close. Because what that means is you found your core. We've long talked about trying to evaluate this team, and they've just never been able to do it. David Griffin said, in years past, we've erred on the side of continuity because we want to see and we want to evaluate what we have here in New Orleans. And that just hasn't been able to be the case because of all the injuries. So next year, let's run it back again, and maybe we'll get to see because we believe in all of this. Didn't happen that year because of injuries again. Let's run it back again and see. And then it doesn't happen because of the injuries and all of that. You're starting to get on a treadmill if you kind of go through that again, but I think that's what they're going to look at here. I think their best case scenario is, okay, Zion's healthy and he works alongside DeJounte Murray, and that unlocks Trey Murphy. And then Hawkins looks good in that. And it's basically like the guys that you have wrapped up long term. So not really Brandon Ingram in this. Those guys playing well together and leading this team on a run. And maybe they don't get to the postseason and they finish 2-3 games back of the 10th spot. They finish in 11, but you went on a run and you got close. They're going to look at that and be like, okay, we do have something here. Now let's move Ingram. Let's maybe still try and upgrade the center position. Let's see what we can add that then puts us over the top. But we at least know the guys that we can count on going forward and that when they are healthy, things work out really well. And that's, I think, going to be their best case scenario. Then you can say, cool, Trey's part of the core. Herb's part of the core. Murray's part of the core. Is Zion part of the core or not? That's the big question there with it. And it goes to everything we've said beforehand. But say he comes back and say things seem to kind of trend in the better direction, whatever that might look like. You go, okay, like trading for DeJounte Murray was the right move. Look at the pace that they played on from January on, and they went on a run. That is important, right? If they don't want to go through a full-on rebuild and tear down, and I don't think they're going to do that, you can look at this as a lost season a la Memphis last year. But the problem with that is it's a lost season. And that's a lost year of CJ, a lost year of Ingram, a lost year of Zion, and all of that. And can you actually do that? And I don't think the answer is yes, because that would be shutting a lot of those guys down, and then you're not going to be able to trade them. If CJ misses the majority of the season, and sounds like he'll be back tonight against the Indiana Pacers for sure on Wednesday, maybe more people coming back on Wednesday, that hurts their trade values. So they've got to play well, and you've got to go on a run, and that's the best case scenario. And look, maybe that means Brandon Ingram realizes, hey, I got to stay here in New Orleans, and you sign him to a $20 to $25 million deal, something just kind of crazy low in a team-friendly deal like that, because there's no money out there and they're winning. There's a way it works out. Now, we might be on this treadmill next year with that, and as we just talked about, I don't know if you can do that, but if you believe in Zion, if the team believes in Zion, and again, I don't think a lot of the stuff that came out literally like all on Friday is a big deal. Truthfully, changing representation, I don't think ultimately matters. I think it says something about his process up to this point, but maybe it does change with just a new voice and some new trust in your new agent. And from what it sounds like where he's going to go, that's someone to trust. So there could be positives coming out of this, but I do think their best case scenario is you go on a run, you go, oh, we have something here. Maybe it's not with Zion, but you're like, you know what? Trey and DeJounte played really well together. And that is kind of our core going forward and who we're going to build around. And maybe you see DeJounte Murray and Herb Jones, like they lock down people on our defense is good again. That's important to know. While getting a high draft pick can be important, there's just too much talent here unless you just shut people down. And I don't think you can kind of do that to lose out. You're going to be competitive in games. DeJounte Murray would have won him that game against the Golden State Warriors, probably would have won the game against the Nets and another one or two. Those guys are going to make a difference. They'll win games because of that. So I don't see them kind of pivoting and tanking, even if it's like, oh, they kind of really don't have a mathematical shot at making the playoffs. They're playing for evaluation and figuring out the future of this team. And if it's good, that's important because that means you won't be bad next year, or you can at least kind of go forward. But it also might depend on Zion and what's changing there and all of the stuff that comes out with it. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Big deal on all the stuff that he's doing. He's not trying. He likes it here. Like he definitely does like it here. And there have been strides made between him and the front office. I don't think it's about a trade or anything like that. I think that's people kind of trying to connect too many dots when it comes to things. And I get why they're doing that. It makes perfect sense. But some of those things, and I don't doubt that they're, those writers are reporting what they've heard and what we're told, but nah. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Enjoy the game. We'll be back tomorrow recapping Pelicans, Pacers, what that might look like. Hopefully a win. Wednesday is also going to be a big one against the Toronto Raptors. Guys, coming back for those games. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This has been the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'll see y'all tomorrow.